Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Recover You. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, Kylene.
Okay, so did I ever tell this story on the podcast? I did already.
Yep.
Yeah, because you always do that.
Uh-huh.
Well, in case somebody's a new listener, a long time ago, many moons ago when I was in college, I was in collegiate chorale, which is a choir, and I was sitting next to this girl, and the conductor kept calling me Kylie. And so one day she's like, Dr. Skoog, it's Kylene. And she looked at me and she's like, I just couldn't take it anymore. So today we're going to talk about compliance versus proactivity.
Yeah.
So this is something, well, let me finish the title. Compliance versus proactivity. How to help your betrayed partner feel safe and heal.
Yeah.
Okay. Why are we talking about this today? Because this is a huge, and I mean huge pain point for betrayed partners. Mm-hmm. So there's like a huge variety of how this shows up and a lot of different kinds of relationships that this will show up in. And maybe even a variety of like people that are like really good in sobriety or people that maybe are struggling with sobriety. So like there's a huge spectrum, but a lot of people within all of that will still kind of fall into compliance versus proactivity. And what I mean by that is compliance is I am checking every single box in my addiction recovery. I am doing all the things, but I am doing all the things that you ask me to do, that you provide to me, that you ask me to read. Like, and if you bring something up, I will agree with you, or I will do it, or I will check the box, or I will go see this therapist. But what the betrayed partners are not seeing is this ownership, this personal responsibility of like, okay, now this is my thing. I'm actively engaged. I am personally invested and interested. This is extremely important to me. Now I'm doing the work on my own. And why is this important? Because what that communicates to betrayed partners is that you don't really care.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to sound mean when I say that, but it's just the reality of it.
Well, what you're saying is the message that is received. It may not be the message you're trying to send.
It may not in a lot of situations be the intent. You may totally be like, oh yeah, I appreciate that you brought me that book and I'm interested in reading it, right? And then you do it. But if they're not seeing that you're finding your own resources in addition to the things that they're asking you to do, or if they're constantly being like, hey, did you go to your therapist? And then they have to drag out like, well, what'd you guys talk about? Like, are you learning anything? Like, not that you have to share everything that you talk about in your sessions, but like, are you keeping your betrayed partner updated on, how is your brain changing? Right, how are you thinking about your behaviors? Are you learning more about the impact? How is your sobriety shifted from like day 1 to day 105? It's like, This is a big pain point for partners because there's a difference between like the first couple months and the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. What I mean by the first couple months is like the first couple months after discovery.
Yeah. In
that case, it's very, very normal that the betrayed partner is the one kind of pulling all these resources and connecting you and like getting things set up. And that's just like normal and I try to tell my betrayed partners this because, sometimes most of the time they're okay with that. Sometimes there might be a little resistance because they're like, well, I don't want to parent my partner. But I always have to remind everybody, when discovery comes out, you're working with someone who is living in addict brain. We cannot make the assumption at this point that they are in full capacity of making reasonable decisions because they have been living in manipulative denying reality to self and living in addict brain for a really long time. And so even for the people that like Patrick, who really, really wanted to do the right thing, he needed me to come in and go, this is happening, and this is happening, to set up the structure that then allowed him to heal. So that's normal. And we just have to remember that addict brain is a real thing, and we do need to participate. I think we should participate in that process in the beginning.
Right. And I think what's relevant to that is when you do brain scans of addicts, you find that their prefrontal cortex has reduced blood flow to it. And so if you think about your prefrontal cortex is your decision maker, it is your right and wrong, it's your brakes, it's all of those things that it's that part of the brain that does that for you.
Yeah.
If it's got reduced blood flow, if it's not being as activated as it needs to be, well, then that's why you need, in that first 30, 60, 90 days, you need to help that person so they can bring their prefrontal cortex back online, get it healthy again,
right,
and kind of get the limbic system calm back down again.
Yeah, and so that's totally fine. So I am in full agreement that betrayed partners. Let's participate in this process. Let's set them up. Let's help them research or connect them. Kind of setting some boundaries in this time is very, very important. All these things, good. But where it gets very exhausting for the betrayed partner very quickly is you're connected to all the resources, and 6 months after you've been connected to the resources, now they have not seen any voluntary work on your own stuff. And that is frustrating because what are we doing at this point?
Yeah.
Then it feels like parenting. Then it feels like it feels confusing because the boxes are being checked. They're quote unquote doing all the right things. They're going to therapy. They're reading the books. But I have to ask. I have to ask the question, how are things going? I have to check in and see how your sobriety is. I have to find a book and suggest it. I'm going to my coach and therapist and I'm asking these questions and I'm working on our relationship, and then I'm getting nothing from the other side.
Yeah. Well, I also think too, this process takes 3 to 5 years to heal from. And people don't really believe that. I think I've mentioned this a couple times on the podcast that, 10 lessons of Conquer. They're like, I'm good. Then I'll do 7 pillars for 8 months. And okay, so that takes me through a year. I'm good now, right? No, you have to keep learning. You have to keep evolving. You have to keep, making sure you challenge yourself. And when there's things that come up in your life that you go, man, that's a little raw right there. I need to figure out why that's happened. So, some folks graduate from the therapy side fairly quickly, let's say 6 months, or maybe some take a lot longer, depending on what's in their past and what they're working through. But to your point, it very quickly becomes the addict's responsibility to seek healing. This is not a 10 lesson and done. This is not a 60 days and done. And this is a 3 to 5 year process where you're really working the process that 3 to 5 years.
That's why we constantly hit the idea of sobriety versus recovery, because I just don't think the world talks about that a whole lot. But yeah, you can get into sobriety super fast. And guess what? You feel great in sobriety. Recovery is hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. And it takes a long time. And I can totally understand why people don't want to open that door, because guess what? You're facing all your demons.
Right.
And it's uncomfortable. And now you have to actually deal with the reasons you became an addict.
Right.
And, for the betrayed partner, we have to do the same work. And it's uncomfortable. And it takes a long time. Yeah. And now we have to deal with all of the wounds that existed before betrayal, that betrayal just reopened or magnified.
Right.
And or wounds that betrayal created. And so it's super, super not fun to do that. But that is why it takes so long. And that's the difference between sobriety and recovery. And I do think, I'm going to mention, you said some people graduate from therapy really fast, like 6 months. Unless finances are an extreme, you're really tight and it's really, really unaffordable for you to continue, I would say there's almost never a situation where 6 months you should be done. Because typically what I will see is that's the honeymoon period between 3 to 6 months where everybody does feel really, really good. Yeah. And they think, hey, I don't need all of this support. I'm actually doing really well. And I am hitting the high of a rebalanced brain chemicals of not seeking the behavior. I'm actually doing really well. Because if you've gotten through the 90 days of celibacy and sobriety at that point, then somewhere around 3 to 6 months, you have that honeymoon period of feeling like excellent and like so happy. And then because you're feeling all the happiness from sobriety, you haven't hit the hard of recovery yet. And that's generally the phase, 3 to 6 months-ish, give or take a little bit, that people will tend to be like, I don't think I need to go to group as much, or I don't think maybe I don't know if I need therapy as much. So I actually caution partners to be aware of that, because betrayed partners, just to be aware, because sometimes that's where we have to set boundaries and say, hey, like I have heard that this is 3 to 5 years. Do you think maybe we can continue this work together? Now, here's the caveat. If finances are extremely tight, they're really, really tight, and you just cannot do therapy that much, there's so many other options. One, don't do therapy weekly, do it every other week. If you can't do it every other week, still meet with your therapist once a month. So like there's an option right there. Let's say it's so tight you cannot meet with a therapist, because a lot of times CSATs and like addiction therapy is out of pocket. It's not covered by insurance. Okay, so next option, maybe find somebody that works specifically in PTSD or trauma or internal family systems or does EMDR that your insurance covers. Okay, so that's like a tier down. Okay, maybe that's not an option. Maybe you can't find anybody that you click with. So that's out. So therapy is like totally out, right? Okay, then there are groups that are incredibly good that you can go to. And this is going into the idea of today's topic, compliance versus proactivity. I do believe if someone really wanted to, they could get into full recovery if they are invested enough in their self-reflection, they're doing everything that a group asks them to do, and they're taking it to heart, and their intentions are in the right place. And I think it'd be easier if they have this other support and the outside external perspective of a coach or a therapist to help them. But if money is super, super tight like that, then you can get into recovery, but never, this is going to be an extreme statement, so hopefully I won't regret it. Never have I ever seen that happen when we have this pattern of compliance versus proactivity. That is only going to happen if you are super engaged and super proactive.
You know, I was thinking about, because the other option is groups, like you were saying, and getting into groups and being part of groups. Sometimes you have to give groups. I will hear guys at times say, well, I just didn't connect with that group. And so my experience was when I first got into group, my very first group, it was a very safe environment. It was very small, and there was a lot of healing there. Then I went into the same type group, but it had a different bunch of people in there, and I wanted to leave. And I think I even talked to you, and you were like, well, we can find another group. But that was after just one night. And I'm glad I gave it a chance, because what ended up happening was it kind of parlayed into the group that I met with over 7 pillars. They were guys from that group. It turned into me being able to co-lead another group. And had I not sat it out and sat in that discomfort, because discomfort was not because of the people in the group, it was because of my own unhealth, my own unhealing or lack of healing that was going on in my head at that point. And so, sometimes proactivity means that you go do hard things and uncomfortable things, right? It doesn't mean that this whole this process is a very uncomfortable process. If it was easy, everybody would go through it. Everybody would be successful. Everybody would have marriages that would come back together. Everybody would all have that if it was just a very, very easy thing to do. But it's not. And so the quicker you understand that and grasp that, it helps you become more proactive. That way you can pick up the book that teaches you hard truths, that maybe makes you cry, that maybe makes you think about your family origin differently than you had. Maybe it makes you think about how you were treated as a child differently than maybe what you've glossed over, right? And so that's part of, sometimes people don't want to be proactive because they don't want to get into the hard stuff. And so it's like,
I would say if recovery is not uncomfortable for you, you're probably not going deep enough.
Not doing it right.
You're not doing it right.
Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And so pros to that. So when you're talking about the different groups, right? Like that we learned through that process, and it actually, so the group that you met with over and over and over and over and over again is 10 weeks. And then they start over and it's another 10 weeks. So people would file in and file out and they'd be different. But you just kept going, which I think that's our recommendation is that you just keep going. Even if it's a 10-week, 12-week, 8-week, whatever program, if it's something that somebody offers repeatedly, keep going, even if the group dynamic changes. Because again, what does that do for you? One, you're going to hear the lesson content over and over and over. And in your case, it was the Conquer group, and they focus really well on educating about the brain and the therapeutic model of recovery. And they also blend in the faith background as well. They kind of intermingle both of those things. But it's a very empowering program, very much like you can recover. You will recover if you do these things. You just have to be willing to do it, which, you and I talk about a lot, is like, we have to have this mindset that I'm capable, that we have to have this mindset that we're capable, because we live into what we believe. And if you don't believe that you can live the rest of your life without pornography or without masturbation or whatever it is that's like repetitively difficult, if you actually don't believe that, then we will live into that belief. So one thing is that you'll hear the lesson topics over and over and over and over, and they'll hit you differently every time. But the other benefit is exactly what you said, which is I'm going to be exposed to different people. And what does that mimic? Life.
Yeah.
Life is hard. We have relatives that are difficult. We have difficult people in the workplace. We have neighbors we don't like. We go to church and there's people that we don't like. We have to, in order to live healthy lives, and this is across the board, this is not just addicts, this is not just betrayed partners, we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
We have to get used to dealing with things that we do not like. And so group can be a little microcosm of that to an extent, where it's like people come and go, and sometimes it's a really excellent mix and you're like, this is awesome. And then other times you're like, maybe this is kind of weird. Like,
to your point, you're learning something at that point. Yeah. There's a reason why maybe the way that guy talks, you don't like it, or maybe the way that guy represents his story, you don't like it. And through those scenarios, when I was a group member and not a group leader, I really took those to heart, and I will steer conversations differently now when I see that. The other thing I want to say about the 3 to 5 years too, from a proactivity versus kind of reactive, is what we're talking about. Is it takes 3 to 5 years when you're actively pursuing healing. So.
Yes.
If you
say it again.
It takes 3 to 5 years when you're actively
pursuing.
So if you do 10 weeks of a conquer, then you take a year off, and then you don't do anything in there, and then you do 10 weeks. You've only been working on it 20 weeks. You haven't been working for it on a year and a year and 10 weeks. So you've got to keep that in mind, which is why being proactive helps, because there's so many podcasts. I always tell the folks in the group, I'm like, listen, every Tuesday, the Pure Desire podcast comes out in the morning, and every Wednesday, our podcast comes out in the morning. And you may hate to hear my voice because you hear me on Monday night too, but we're talking about this topic. And the whole point is to get inundated with this stuff on a weekly basis. So it's challenging your thinking, and it's making you think differently. And it's
like Tuesday, you might hear the same thing that you hear on Friday, but maybe it's phrased in a different way.
That's right.
Sometimes I'll listen to a different podcast, and they'll talk about the same exact things that you and I talk about, but they'll say it differently, or they'll have a different story, or they'll have like a slightly different angle that they share the same concept, and it will hit me, even though like I technically know what they're talking about, and I understand the concept really, really well, and maybe even teach it. Then hearing that, that's such a good way to think about that, or maybe I hadn't thought about it that way, And I would say, especially when you're getting into recovery from something like addiction, it takes like 7 to 12 times to hear something before we actually really absorb it and understand it. So particularly when you're transitioning from something that is a pattern that has usually been a pattern for a decade or more, usually we're dealing with like 2 to 3 decades at this point. When you're dealing with patterns like that, it is going to take repetitive information, same information, multiple times from multiple different angles to really hit you in a way that makes sense to you, to the point that you can absorb it and then apply it and then take action on it.
Right.
So it's really important to know, that lesson didn't really work for me.
Yeah.
When I was, when you're in the entrepreneurial world, you learn from a bunch of different business coaches and all these different things, right? And there was this one time that, and I'm sure maybe more than one time, but this idea that basically like, usually it's not the program that fails. It's your willingness to get something out of the program.
Absolutely.
And so I would say that totally applies to these situations. So is there sometimes like a bad group? Yes. And let me kind of I'll caveat that in just a moment. But generally, when you're talking about recovery programs, when you're talking about support groups that are like focused on healing and providing education and like giving you tools and resources for recovery and sobriety, and they're there to help you feel supported and provide accountability and stuff like that. Most of the time, the effectiveness of that is not going to be exactly the way someone said something on Tuesday. It's going to be your willingness to hear what they're saying and apply it to your life.
Over a cumulative way.
Over a period of time. Yeah. So the little asterisk I was going to say is, if there are groups that really don't challenge each other, don't hold each other accountable, and kind of all have the mentality that you can't ever really get fully healed, and that sobriety will be a lifelong struggle, then I would find another group, because you want to be surrounded by people that can encourage you that true recovery is possible.
Absolutely.
And that can pull you forward when you are doubting yourself in that area.
Yeah.
100%. So a couple of things that you sort of mentioned. I'm trying to remember what the context was. Maybe it was people in the group. You said at that point you're learning something when you're talking about different environments and feeling like a little triggered by something. And I just wanted to reiterate, when I think that's a great point, because I always say a trigger is a reflection of an unhealed wound. So that's goes right along with the idea of a trigger doesn't necessarily mean you leave the situation.
Right.
It means it's an opportunity to do some self-reflection and go, why did I get activated by this? What was it in the way that someone said something why did that upset me? Is it because it felt true and it made me feel guilty? Or is it because someone said something and I felt like they were being inauthentic? And that, I for me personally, like just speaking as Kylene, like that, I really, that energy of inauthenticity, like super triggers me now, because the more healed we've gotten, the more that becomes obvious. And I'm like, ooh, I don't like that. So things like that, right? But now I know. And so now, instead of going, oh my gosh, I was having this conversation, or I heard this, and then I have no idea why I was so anxious about it. Now I can go, I know exactly why I was feeling anxious, because my nervous system picked up on this person is in denial, they are manipulative, they are not taking responsibility, and that's a trigger for me. Now, what do you do with that? That's the thing. When you have an unhealed wound, to me, in that situation, that's just awareness. But in other situations, understanding triggers point back to, okay, maybe that's a belief that I have about myself that I need to heal, so that when I'm running into people that reflect that to me, I don't get as activated, right?
Well, in my case, what I would get annoyed with, because I was very good about doing all of the work in the program, and
wait, I know where this is going. You get activated when people don't journal.
I wasn't going to say journal, but they show up to every evening and they don't do the work, and I would kind of be like, gosh, why don't they do the work?
Yeah.
But it was interesting, because the lesson it taught me through that was, hey, it's not really about your worth is not based on your performance. Your worth is based on you as an individual. And so I had to figure out different ways to connect with folks. And so that was a really, other than kind of being like, you're not performing. Now, we do say in here, like, hey, do the work. The work is really, really super important. But, sometimes in these situations, there are certain like mental blocks to being able to get the work that people have to kind of work through.
But that is doing the work.
That is doing the work, right?
Why couldn't I get myself
that's right.
to do this exercise?
Yeah. Right.
What was it bringing up in me? And so that's the encouragement. I mean, with this whole concept of being proactive is something's making me uncomfortable. Instead of going, okay, I'm going to walk away from that, going, why did this make me uncomfortable? What can I learn about myself from this? What is this question bringing up that is reflecting something in me that I'm uncomfortable with, right? And how can I face it with courage, because it is uncomfortable? How can I face it with courage and maybe curiosity, get to know it a little bit, get to understand it a little bit, and go, oh, okay, well, I don't have to be scared of this thing. Right. Okay, so now let me do this exercise. But that takes some time. That's why we do, that's why we do encourage you to be working with a coach or practitioner or a therapist, because they can, you can take that to a session and be like, man, I had this homework in my group. It was like to, answer these 3 questions, and I just cannot answer question 3. Yeah. And someone, having people to give you feedback, that's going to be obviously ideal. Even if that's not an option though, be honest, be committed to having integrity and honesty, and be committed to being brave and courageous with vulnerability. Right. Take that to your group and talk to them about it. Be honest, because you might say, guy number 3 over here is like, you know what? I felt the same way. I was able to do it because this is what came up for me. And then I was able to process through it. And then you go, oh my gosh, that resonates. You know, so the way forward is never to turn away from discomfort.
Right.
When we're talking about healing and recovery for both individuals, it's never to turn away from discomfort. It's actually learning why that feels so uncomfortable, and then determining, okay, how do I process that? What do I do with that so I can actually move through the discomfort? Because moving through it is going to create a life that is way more resilient and way less fragile, which if you think about, you know, the mental house that an addict lives in, it's very fragile. And it's very collapsible if one lie is found out, if one self-deception is gone. You know what I mean? Like it's built on toothpicks. And so
it's a house of cards.
So what we're trying to do through recovery is build a really firm foundation for yourself and for your relationship that's really, really strong. And that takes courage. It takes honesty. It takes vulnerability. It takes facing the hard. It takes being really brave and not running away from discomfort. Discomfort, I think that if we can embrace the idea that discomfort leads to healing in this process, we're going to do so much better. The other thing you were talking about is like the time, the 3 to 5 years. And this thought just sort of hit me, and I don't know if I'll be able to explain it because I don't fully understand it myself. But you know how so every 7 years, the body is completely regenerated. Like we don't have one cell in our body that is the same if it's past a 7-year cycle. It's like different parts of your body regenerate at different rates, but to have the complete body regenerated, it takes 7 years. You know what I'm talking about?
I think I've heard that.
So like, let's say your stomach takes 3 years, or, you know, like the cells on the inside of your stomach, maybe you're like, you know, fast turnover, and then other parts of your body are like slow turnover. So the whole thing is like, it's a brand new you in 7 years, right? So the reason I'm mentioning that specifically as like a physical example is I think there's similar things in terms of energetic growth cycles. We as physical beings have this regeneration in like 7-year cycles, but as energetic spiritual beings, we have growth cycles as well. And I have really been thinking about the 3 to 5 year thing, because as we've navigated it, again, to your point, with full intention, nonstop, the whole time, basically. So 4.5 years in, we're kind of coming to the end of this 3 to 5, right? I have continually noticed throughout time, like, oh, this is why it's 3 to 5. Oh, this is why it's 3 to 5. Oh, this. Because it's like, oh, there will be another healing shift. We've taken a step up. Oh, and it's literally, and I don't know if I can verbalize this effectively. It is like internal energetic healing shifts that happen, even if nothing specific has changed in the past 6 months. We've just kept doing what we're doing and kept building on it. It's I think that's the best way I can explain it. There's physical cell turnover. I think there is energetic healing turnover. And I think that takes a certain amount of time. And I think that is like spiritually written in our DNA in some way that we don't understand. And I think when we do the work and things click, certain things shift based on that timeline. And I don't know how else to explain that. I guess the other part that I'll say in the emotional side of things is you don't experience things until you experience them again. So you have to be ready for that. You have to be ready. And I think this is a pretty common trajectory, and it happened to us too. You start by shutting everything down. So the addict stops looking at stuff, right? So then the addict gets over their addiction. And then the betrayed partner learns everything there is to know about the addiction. So then you go through this very highly intensive process in a lot of cases, which is the therapeutic disclosure and the empathy letters and the restitution letters and the polygraphs. It's very, very intense, and it's very focused, and it has an end date. And you get through that and you go, okay, now what? And then you decide what the next steps are. Are you rebuilding? If you're living apart, what does that mean? If you're what does it take to get back? So let's say you go through all of those things. Like in our case, we were able to reestablish physical intimacy
And then what was hard for us and what we've been working on over the last 4 years is, hey, what does it mean to be normal again? What does it mean to be a normal couple? And that took a lot of work. It took a lot of reflection. It took a lot of, bringing it to groups and seeking out different. And
then every once in a while, even though I wasn't in therapy anymore, once or twice, however many times it was over so many years, I'd go back to my therapist and then have a crying session and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated right now. You have to talk about these things.
Yeah.
So you hit these different milestones and then you're like, okay, what next? Yeah. So the version of healing shifts over time for sure, but the intentionality and the effort put in doesn't.
Yeah.
So again, this compliance versus proactivity on the side of the addict is it's not just about getting in sobriety. If you stop at sobriety, you are shortchanging yourself and you are 100% shortchanging your relationship. So we want you to get into recovery so that you can feel free and happy. And we want you to get into recovery so that your relationship has a chance. Because I will say, hearing from so many betrayed partners over so much time, this is a huge pain point. And they will come up and they will ask the questions. They're like, he's checking all the boxes, but I don't feel like it's harder than it. And that's compliance. That's not taking personal responsibility and action and being totally invested in their own healing, right? And so what would it be like in that situation if all of a sudden the individual that's just checking the boxes goes, hey, I got this book. Hey, let me update you on this chapter. Hey, this is what I'm thinking. I had this aha moment about my behavior. That makes a difference. And what is that? It's vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that I would imagine that a lot of times that may be part of the reason that it's not happening is because there's fear, right?
Well, and there's couples that will engage, and we did it for a while too, but there was couples that will engage in a either a nightly or a weekly check-in with each other. And so the difference would be the husband waits for her to say, all right, let's check in hopes that she's not going to bring it up, right? That is... Because he will comply if she says, let's do the check-in. He won't fight it,
right?
But he's not going to bring it up.
Versus being proactive.
Proactive, where you go, hey, honey, don't forget, tonight's the check-in. And boy, do I have a list for you. No, don't say that. But, be
honest.
Yeah, be honest.
Whatever it is, be honest.
Yeah, but initiate the check-in, even though it might mean that, let's say maybe you lied during the week. Maybe that's one of the things, and you have to speak into that. And so, you tell the truth because it's the right thing to do, you know what I mean? And so that's, when I think deep down that the betrayed spouses, they understand that this is hard. They know it's hard on them, and they understand it's hard on you. What they want to see from you is you stepping into the hard, you moving towards the flames. They
in my mind,
do that.
The grace period is the 3 to 6 months. That's the grace period.
Yeah.
If I get this is hard, I get you're getting into sobriety, I get your brain chemicals are calming down. After that, what are you doing, buddy? What's happening?
Yeah.
Are you taking this seriously? Because after that, I got to pull away and focus on my own stuff.
Right.
I can't.
That's
when the fatigue starts to hit. Is if they're in sobriety and they've passed the 90 days and it's significantly past the 90 days, but this proactivity isn't happening. That's when all of these things start to happen in the betrayed partner's mind. Like, what is going on here? Is this something that I'm going to have to live with the rest of my life? Do I need to pursue other options? Like, what's next year going to like? Is it look like? Is he, we have to make decisions based on the behaviors that we see. So give us good behaviors that show us that you're committed to recovery and show us that you're committed to healing the relationship.
Well, we mentioned this in an earlier episode too, but some of that proactivity can be in the form of helping out around the house.
For sure.
Maintain that, if there's kids in the house, make sure you're taking care of that, or doing everything you can, chores. If there's a second job that's needed, sometimes in order to afford therapy, you might need a second job. Well, go get that second job. Do whatever it takes.
Uber on the weekends.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk. If this was cancer, you would approach it differently. So think about it from a cancer of the mind, and this is something that you really, really want to go after.
It really is, because it's like a disease in the idea that if you don't deal with it, it grows. It's not a disease in that like a virus where like once you have it, it's always in your body,
right?
Like you can get rid of it. You can 100% get rid of it.
Right.
But you have to take it seriously, because if you don't, it will grow and it will continue to destroy things for sure. Yeah, I think it's important. So, but you were just mentioning about the, doing things around the house and like kind of, so like how could you, being busy for recovering addicts is important, especially in the beginning, because you need to keep your mind preoccupied with healthy things so that you're essentially flooding your system with things that are beneficial for your brain and your body in replacement of the flooding that you used to do with things that were not beneficial and actually harmful. So there is a line, because there is busyness sometimes can be a replacement coping mechanism where I'm not doing the work of sitting still and facing my emotions. So that's not what we're talking about. We do want you to sit still, to sit with the discomfort, to sit with the anxiety, to learn how to process it, to learn how to move it through your body, to all of those things. And fill your days with proactive, beneficial thinking exercises and activities and healthy movement. And if you have a lot of free time, what can you fill that time with in a positive way? So maybe as much as it might sound silly for a man, maybe get one of those coloring books. Like, can we focus our mind in a way that's calming and relaxing? Do I need to read a book that has positive messages, but maybe it's not about recovery because maybe I already did my recovery work that day. But did I exercise today? Did I eat healthy foods? Like, what can we kind of plan and work around in our recovery work to feed our mind and our body and keep ourselves nourished and keep our mind thinking about positive things? And then if we have a family and a partner, what can we do to be part of the family and to help and to engage? And absolutely. I think that's really important. Okay, so for the betrayed partners who have a compliant spouse but not a proactive spouse, this is, one of those things we have to make decisions on based on behavior, not words, right? So based on the amount of time that you've been sitting in this, at some point we have to make a decision. Are we okay with this long term? Are we not okay with this? Right. So if this is like 6 months in, okay, maybe let's give it some more time. But it's also okay to set some boundaries around expectations. So again, boundaries are not ever trying to force someone to do something that you want them to do. You cannot change your partner no matter what you do. They have to want to change themselves, period. But what you can do is decide really clearly, spend some time with yourself, with your therapist, with your coach, and spend some time really thinking what it is that you need to be a healthy individual, what is required in order to be in a healthy relationship with you, and what you will and will not tolerate in your life moving forward. That is what you set boundaries on. So that's inviting the person into health with you, and then they can choose to respect that or not respect that. But at that point, you go, hey, this is, your behavior is not respecting this boundary. And because of that, my behavior is going to change and I'm going to do X, Y, Z, right? And so sometimes setting those boundaries very, very clearly and really holding to them and moving through with the outcome, whatever that is for the particular boundary that you're talking about. There's a huge spectrum of outcomes there. But holding to the outcomes, sometimes that shifts things and the addict partner will go, okay, this is different. The environment's different. It's a little more difficult now. There's a little more motivation for me to change now. And so and sometimes that's enough. And sometimes it's not. And so that's where we have to make boundaries from a place where we are ready to take action on them. And I would not set boundaries if you are not willing to take action on them. Right. So sometimes that takes some healing work of really going, okay, how do I view myself? What are my own beliefs about who I am and the effort, that I am worth, and the things that I will tolerate and not tolerate. And if I have blocks there, working with someone to really help with the healing process so that we can feel really, really comfortable using our voice and saying, hey, this is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I'm not comfortable with. And I'm going to live my life moving forward in a way that is fulfilling and healthy. You can join me, which I would absolutely love. And I want you to join me in this. But if you choose not to, I'm going to go live my life. And so I would just think about, how can you create a life that feels safe and purposeful to you? And make, so a lot of times if we feel stuck, we may need to shift our thinking and shift our own behavior. So do we have our own bank accounts? Do we need to start working part-time? Does our life need to shift a little bit? Right. Are we spending time with friends and family and engaged in hobbies or activities that fulfill us and give us energy? Are we spending time around people that fill us with energy? Because navigating the early phases of recovery can be exhausting for the betrayed partner. Mm-hmm. So, what are we doing to fill our own life? And so that we can feel very, very secure that we have options and that we have choice, because then we may not need to use it. Maybe over the course of a year, and you set some clear boundaries, and you get your own bank account. You end up finding a job that you really, really love, and then your partner does a lot of work and respects your boundaries and grows a lot. And then you're like, oh, awesome. Like everything's good. But I really like this part-time job and I feel really fulfilled and I've met new friends and this feels really awesome. Or maybe at the end of the year, he did not respect your boundaries, but now you feel like you're more secure and you're empowered in your choice to either stay or go. So like just a suggestion, like that's not, we know that we've said this a million times in this podcast. There are 10,000 differentials that we're not necessarily like, we don't know every one of every person listening to this podcast, but just this idea of the earlier a betrayed partner can begin to work on their own internal healing and creating a life that they love independent of their partner is going to be beneficial, whether you stay with that person or not. Yeah. I know that the month that I found out was the highest monthly income I'd ever earned for my business. It was like shockingly good. And I was so relieved because as I was processing this information, I was like, okay, I know that if we have to split up, I'll be okay. Like, I know that I'll be okay. And that was like proof to me that I would be okay because I had this huge influx in my bank account and I never had to use it, thankfully. But it really gave me the sense of this is so much my choice, right? And so that was really, really helpful. And that's obviously not everyone's situation, and so sometimes we feel stuck. But I really I touched base with an old client recently and caught up with her, and it was really exciting because when we were in the beginning of her kind of working through everything, she was kind of in that position of like, I don't know what would happen. I don't have a job. I don't know. And then she got a part-time job, and just getting the part-time job, she was like, this is like giving me life. Yeah. She loved it. And she was like, this is so amazing. It just felt so good to her. And by the way, I think she has, I'm going to get this wrong. I want to say like 8 kids. So it's a big family, right? Mm-hmm. So like a lot of responsibility, a lot that she does like to manage the house and manage the family and everything like that. But anyway, she got a part-time job. And then this time that we were checking in, she was like, guess what, Kylene? She's like, I somehow came across like this one job. And I don't think she was like specifically looking for this, but it worked out. And she got this full-time job. I think it comes with benefits, all this kind of stuff. She's like, and then my husband lost his job and I am paying all the bills. Me. And so she felt so good about that. And they're still together and he's doing better now. But she just feels so good knowing that she's capable of this. And that was so empowering to her. So it doesn't have to be getting a job, but like, are we spending time around people that empower us? Are we doing our own healing work? Are we engaged in activities that fill us with energy, that help us feel good about our own lives independent of our partner? Because if we are depending on our partner for our own worth and happiness, then that could go 10,000 different ways over the next 6 months to the next 6 years. So really, wherever we are, no matter how proactive they are, it's going to be important that we take action on our own lives.
Right. Yep.
And then we can be proactive instead of compliant, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have a compliant wife, Patrick?
No.
No.
Not at all.
Am I proactive? I hope so.
Huh.
You're fired. That's a terrible way to end the podcast. All right. So any other thoughts on it? You're supposed to answer that. Delete.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I it's interesting because you have always pursued your own healing too. I mean, you really, really have. And so, you do see this, where guys, I'm trying to think. I think it always helps a relationship when the betrayer is super, super proactive, because it ends up giving you credibility too. So when it builds your credibility, because you're being overly proactive, then you can help your partner if they're betrayed, and you can say, hey, I was thinking about this, because you're coming at it from a point of strength, meaning not like you're lording over them, but you're like, I've gone through all this healing work and I know how these things impacted me, and I'm seeing this pattern in you, and I'm coming at you with the greatest degree of love. I'm not coming at you and yelling at you, be like, you need to get healing, you know what I mean? Because that's the worst thing you want to do. But you're like, hey, I noticed that you get sad in this thing, or you get whatever. Do you think that maybe this practitioner could help you, or this resource could help you, or something like that?
And to that point, though, there can come a period of time where, let's say, someone gently brings that up and makes a suggestion, and someone is just not willing to be proactive in their own healing. And that may become a pain point in the relationship, where that becomes a boundary that's like, hey, if you're not willing to move forward, like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Because when one person chooses healing and the other doesn't, the person that chooses healing can only move so far in their own healing.
Right.
It really stagnates at a certain point. And so we all individually have to come to this choice of, are we okay where we're at? Mm-hmm. And if we're okay where we're at right now, will we still be okay with it in 5 years? Yeah. And if the answer is no, then we either need to set a boundary around that and then make a decision, check in again in 6 months or a year or whatever, depending on what the boundary is. Right. Or if we know that it's not going to change, where do we go from here? Yeah. What are we going to do?
Well, and to make sure we're very clear on all of this, but unfortunately, both parties have to go through healing activity, structured healing activity after betrayal.
Mm-hmm. It can go the other way too, where the addict partner really works really hard and the betrayed partner doesn't.
But this is what I would tell the addict partner who's working very hard. Because you hurt them, don't approach them in the same way that they had to approach you when they discovered that you were betraying them. You know what I mean? Recognize the root of their unhealth. Recognize what's happened in there because of what you did to them. And really think about, it's not a chance for you to go, now I'm going to make sure they have a polygraph, and I'm going to make sure that I look at their phone all the time, and I always, you know what I mean? Like that's not, that's not a loving relationship. That's not making living amends. And so what you want to do is you want to be able to, by influencing and encouraging and leading your partner to healing, to receive maybe the gift that you've started to receive. That's really where health is. You know what I mean? You don't want to browbeat, each other into healing.
Yeah, because at that point, what are you doing?
Right. Yeah. Why bother?
Yeah, it's not. If you don't want to be here, thanks for telling me.
That's right.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this up with 2 questions that you can ask yourself if this podcast is resonating with you. Number 1 is, if there are areas of discomfort in my life, how have my behaviors contributed to that discomfort? So what have I done or said or engaged in that might be contributing to the pain points currently existing in my life? And then we can think about that, and we can go, okay, how do those behaviors need to change moving forward? The second question is, when you identify a pain point or a part of your life that is uncomfortable, whether it be emotions or triggers or whatever it is, how can you think about moving towards that discomfort with curiosity and compassion? And again, that's something maybe to take to your group and talk about, parts work or journaling exercises, or whatever you might be working through with your coach or your practitioner or your therapist. Like, how can I, how do I face this trigger? How do I process this in a healthy way, right? But those 2 questions can kind of help you kind of lock in what we're talking about today, because the idea is you will become a more proactive person if you understand that it takes discomfort to be proactive and to move forward. If we're so afraid of the outcome of the choices that we make when we know they're the right choices, then there's something going on there. We have to move forward, or moving forward takes courage. There's nobody that's gone through this process, whether it's an addict or a betrayed partner, that's just like, oh yeah, this was a breeze and I never felt scared and I never had any fear and this was so easy. Like, it was not. anybody that is on the other side saying that they feel like they have a happy, healthy life has faced incredibly uncomfortable moments, not knowing what the outcome would be. And they chose to do it anyway because they knew that that choice would move them closer to healing. And so that's what we're encouraging for you guys today. Every day is a new opportunity to choose health and freedom. Make that choice today, and we will see you next week. Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.